Hi, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for your presence. We are really happy that you could make it to the show. And sir, before we start, can you give us an introduction about yourself to our viewers, as well as your experience in Navy, how it has been?
I'm a naval aircraft MiG-29K technical officer. I have served in the Navy for 10 years. So coming to why I joined the Navy. So we've done our engineering together. I'm an electronics and communication engineer. So in our college, we have studied the engineering concepts of power generation, distribution, navigation, communication, radar, electro-optics. But we have studied the theoretical part of it and we've not been able to see the practical aspect of it. So when I joined the Navy, and the Navy being a three-dimensional platform with surface Navy ships, with submarines and aircraft, equipped with all systems and sensors that work on the fundamentals of these technologies, I was able to visualize the practical application of these technologies. So it has given me a sense of completeness and meaningfulness to what I had prepared in my engineering, and it gives a complete
But why not the private sector? Why join Indian Navy itself? Even in private sector, these opportunities were there.
Yeah, private sector also these opportunities are there, but in private sector it's more on the design front. So private sector is entrusted with the responsibility of design, development, fabrication, production and manufacturing. But finally the application or the sphere or area of application where these technologies are implemented is either the armed forces or space or aerospace. So this is an area where I was able to visualize how these engineering fundamentals and concepts were implemented. So it has given me a sense of completeness and it has complemented my theoretical learning of engineering.
Yes, true. But at the age of 22, sir, 22 is the age when you joined.
Correct.
So at that age, when you were going to join the Navy, what was running in your mind? Definitely you would have got private sector offers, you would have been in private sector, you were placed. But you opted to go for the Navy.
Correct. So it is a dual role, I must say. So Navy is a phenomenon. Every Indian inherently likes to serve, likes to contribute to the nation, and he has an inherent belongingness to his country. So Navy is the platform. Army, Navy and Air Force are the platforms where national security is served, where the roles of military, policing, humanitarian aid and disaster relief and diplomacy are implemented. So I felt that this is the platform where I can contribute to the fullest, and that is how I homed on to joining the Indian Navy.
So you have served in various capacities now in this 10 years. You have been a lieutenant commander, and you have actually served even on Vikramaditya, as well as you have served like you have taken care of the aircrafts on base. You have gone sailing. So when you started out in Navy, like the first initial training period, how was it for you? Because I keep hearing that when people get into army or the armed forces, that first initial 6 months is a very tough time because there is more of mental and physical exertion. How was it for you?
So Indian Naval Academy is a whole new experience for me. So the perception that I had Indian Naval Academy when I stepped into it was a complete shock to me, not a surprise. So we had landed at Kannur, and from there we were taken by a bus to the Indian Naval Academy. I knew that I was selected for an officer entry. So when we went into the academy, there were these signboards which said officers residence to the left and squadrons to the right. So I thought naturally the bus will take a left, but he took a right. So I was wondering, why is he taking a right? I'm supposed to go to the officer's residence. But then when I realized, it was like peeling an onion. So every minute in the academy, at least in the initial 2 weeks, was like peeling of the skin of an onion, where everything that unfurled was new to me. So I did not know people who were already there in the Navy and who were able to guide me about the routine of the Navy. So it was like in Bangalore, it was a comfortable life for me under the careful and protective shelter of family and friends. But when I went there, it was like in the open sea. So I realized that you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you have a rigorous PT regimen, you have a rigorous academic regimen, you have a rigorous parade regimen. And added to that, we used to have study periods and a lot of activities that are meant to hone your skills and grow you up as an officer. So there were physical tests and swimming tests. So I was average in both these, physical and swimming. So I had to work upon these training skills to reach that minimum standard or threshold. So owing to my level of competence, I was made to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of rigorous training, a lot of physical exercises, a lot of swimming. So it was a whole new experience for me, and staying awake in class after all this training at 9 o'clock in the morning was a challenge on its own. So we used to have our instructors who used to carefully watch us whether we are dozing off in class or not. So you doze off in class, simple. You are made to go out, you're on your hands in the rain. So I joined in the autumn term where it was raining heavily. So that used to keep you awake. And then we used to have breakfast, lunch and dinner. So to spell it out, it was a spread of items. You go into the mess was so big. It was like a grandeur. I remember that Harry Potter movie where people used to have lunch. So it used to be a wide spread of items, but you used to have only 1 or 2 minutes to have this sumptuous breakfast. And added to that, people used to be there. They used to regulate you, the way you eat, the way you conduct yourself. And at least in the first 2 weeks, we ended up drinking only water. So the punishment for not adhering to a code of conduct was to drink water. So I used to have all sorts of breakfast out there, but mostly we ended up drinking jugs of water only.
Okay. It looks
I think I'm speaking too much. Probably I'm in a flow. I have to.
No. It's really enriching your experience. It's actually, we are understanding how tough the Navy training is and how much difficulties you have to go through initially. But when they do this training, is there a rationale behind this? Why such a rigorous training? See, yeah, I get it. Physical exertion, everything is required for the armed forces, but not giving time to eat. So, is there a time discipline that is being taught over there, that it has to be, everything has to come in a perfect time?
The training is to make you physically fit and mentally strong, and there is no second word about it. Here, our neglect or our incompetency or even a slight variance from the threshold of competency can lead to a loss of life. Finally, we are trained and we go into the battlefield. For the army guys, it is the battlefield. For the Navy guys, it is the sea frontier. And for the Air Force guys, it is the air frontier. So 1 second of delay can lead to a loss of life.
Oh.
That's how it translates into.
Okay.
So even when we are in our ship, we have a concept called action station. So we believe, or our subconscious is tuned to the fact that we are in a state of war. We are pursuing war.
Okay.
So we are always process oriented. We are always on the go.
You are always on high alert.
Yes.
Okay. That is the reason.
Correct.
That is how the training has been designed.
Correct.
And I think that is how the service is
Yes,
designed.
that is how the service is designed, and no person of the armed forces can bear the burden of a thought that because of his neglect, it led to damage to loss of life or loss of property or infrastructure. Nobody can take that. So it is subconsciously ingrained in you, and we always want to deliver beyond what is expected.
Amazing. Really amazing. Because that level of a responsibility, that level of a commitment, it strikes out. No wonder why the armed forces is one of the most respected professions. So, sir, when you have been in the Navy, after your training, what was your first assignment?
So we had a training. Initially, I started off as a surface Navy officer. So I'll reiterate this. The Indian Navy is a 3-dimensional force. It operates in the submarine. It operates in the surface as a surface Navy. On surface, it operates under the surface as a subsurface submarine arm, and it operates in air as a naval aviation arm. Okay. I was a technical officer of MiG-29K aircraft. So the naval air arm is entrusted with the responsibility of carrier strike capability, fleet air defense, maritime reconnaissance, and anti-submarine warfare. So as I mentioned, I was a technical officer of MiG-29K aircraft, and as you mentioned, I have operated from the aircraft carrier as well. So the Indian Navy stands testimony to the fact that a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what it's built for. So it is a matter of insult to us that we are still in harbor. So we used to take pride in being out there in the oceans and carrying out our duties and responsibilities. So 10 years of service along the lines, the Navy gives you more. has been an ocean of opportunities, and I hope to leverage all that I have learnt in the Navy in my next innings.
So, largely the Indian population views Army, Navy, and Air Force as a military force. That is, it is mainly to be ready during the wartime. Do you think, or as per your experience, is Navy only a military force? Right? Only ready for war, they need to be ready for war.
So, as I mentioned, we have a land frontier, we have a sea frontier, and we have an air frontier. And maintaining or protecting national security and maintaining integrity is about encompassing all these three frontiers. So the Navy is tasked with protecting the coastline of around 7,500 kilometers in addition to the littoral. So Navy, as we all know it, have four major roles. So one is our military role, one is our policing role. We all know that the Indian Ocean is the hub of trade and tradition. So majority of trade happens through the Indian Ocean region. So a lot of merchant vessels keep plying here. So it is the Indian Navy's responsibility to act as a police at sea and ensure that piracy is kept at bay and all the natural resources that are bartered or traded between various countries are safe and sound. So that is the second role, and of course, owing to the global warming and owing to various climate changes, we realize that there are a lot of natural calamities happening. So one of the key roles of Indian Navy in this aspect is humanitarian aid and disaster relief.
Okay.
And final role is about diplomatic roles. So it is we Indians and Indian Navy believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is, the entire world is one family. We don't just believe in protecting our nation, our frontiers. So we want to live as a family. So we carry out diplomatic roles and assignments where we enter into strategic partnerships with various nations. We help other countries out in carrying out their discharging their roles and responsibilities, and they also help us out. So it is, we grow each other in the Indian Ocean region. So we grow each other towards becoming a more better and a prosperous country.
You said that the Navy has three arms. One is the subsurface, that is a submarine arm. One is the surface arm, where you have all the fleets. And then you also mentioned that there is a naval arm, that is a flight arm above sky. For a Navy, why do you need flights? Because we already have an Air Force. Isn't that stepping into the role of Air Force?
Okay, so as I earlier mentioned, we have the army and a corresponding land frontier or a border frontier. Likewise, Air Force also has an air frontier and Navy has a sea frontier. So there are certain limitations when we operate and work towards protecting the interests in these frontiers and the kind of assets that we procure. Now, all the Air Force assets are not capable or not equipped, I must say, to handle a certain frontier or to operate beyond a certain frontier. So it is a good match the following between the responsibility and the tasking I have in a particular frontier and the kind of assets, the capabilities and resources that I have. While we have fighter jets such as Su-30, MiG-29, Jaguars in the Indian Air Force, they have a sensor suit, they have a weapon suit that is designed for a particular area of interest or for a particular frontier of operation. Likewise, the MiG-29K aircraft, I can give you an example. So it has an onboard oxygen generation system. So oxygen is synthesized in the aircraft itself. So earlier aircraft or the not so advanced MiG-29 is a 4++ generation fighter aircraft embodied with state-of-the-art avionics. Okay. So one such avionics is onboard oxygen generation system wherein oxygen is synthesized onboard the aircraft itself. Okay. Whereas in most of the other aircraft platforms that you see, oxygen cylinders are carried. So it has a finite time of operation. Whereas when we are operating into the sea, horizon is the limit. Like for Air Force, sky is the limit. For the Navy, horizon is the limit. Okay. We are required to go hundreds of nautical miles from our base, from our littoral and beyond. Okay. So this is where the sensors capabilities or the aircraft platforms capabilities come into role. So it is a strategic procurement that happens with respect to the assets. It is all based on the area of requirement, frontier of requirement, required role and responsibility and capabilities. So to summarize, Army has a land frontier, Air Force has an air frontier, and Navy has a sea frontier. So our assets are procured in such a manner that they cater dedicatedly to the area and role of interest in these frontiers.
So you're telling that there is a limitation with respect to the range that these crafts can go. And when you take the case of Navy, it's my assumption that only an aircraft carrier can carry these things. Am I right?
No. So the thing is, yes, Vikramaditya is the mother. We call Vikramaditya the mother. So I have mostly operated from Vikramaditya, but Indian Navy has a fleet of aircraft carriers now that Vikrant has joined us and has a carrier battle group of its own. So in addition, we have frigates, we have destroyers, we have corvettes, we have oil tankers and many more. Okay. So naval aviation encompasses fighter aircrafts, helicopters and LRMR aircraft, that is long range maritime and reconnaissance aircraft. So while long range maritime reconnaissance aircraft can operate only from land, because these are like, we have the Boeing P-8 type. So it is very much similar to our Airbus A320 or our Boeing 737 aircraft that are used for civil aviation. Okay. So these aircraft have endurance and have certain sensors, whereas our helicopters, so there is a requirement of search and rescue operations in the ocean. So if I come back to MiGs again, MiG-29K by design is an unstable aircraft. The aerodynamics is unstable so that it can maneuver all the way it can. It can fly inverted, it can do dogfights, it can do any sort of maneuver that the pilot is capable and skilled of doing. Okay. So these cannot be ensured in plain aerodynamics like our Boeing aircraft has. So when I take a flight to Indigo cannot do a reverse flying or he cannot do a dog maneuver because his aerodynamics is such. True. So as I mentioned, every platform has a strategic reason behind its procurement. So is it meant for transport? Is it meant for fighting? Is it meant for dogfights? Is it meant for hovering like helicopters? So when you, let's say,
it's like that Top Gun movie where they show how inverted.
So if you have to get a glimpse of naval aviation in a more glamorous note, kindly watch Top Gun Maverick. It's amazing. So as I mentioned, so a helicopter is there, so it has various roles. So you have, I'll give you one example. One is, let's say there is an unfortunate incident and there is a ditching into the sea. So how is it that you rescue people who are there in the oceans? Our fixed wing aircraft cannot rescue because a fixed wing aircraft cannot hover. Yes, we had a Sea Harrier aircraft which has got decommissioned, and the USP or the unique selling point of that aircraft was that it could hover. But that is no more in service. So we have helicopters that can hover and execute a search and rescue operation. I am very sure all of you would have watched the movie Uri. So while Uri has shown a helicopter hovering and releasing releasing the Army Special Forces, Navy also has a special force of its own called the Marine Commandos. Yes. So you can relate the Marine Commandos to the event with respect to Taj attack in Mumbai. So Marine Commandos played a role in this event. So we have certain dedicated helicopters, Sea King Mark 42 Bravo. So it is a variant of Sea King helicopter that is dedicated for Marine Commando operations, for going into various terrains, for going into uncharted territories, and for letting the Marine Commandos out. So it is meant for that operation. So we have helicopters that operate from all these platforms, from frigates, from corvettes, from destroyers, and we have fixed wing aircraft mostly, or the fighter aircraft operating from Vikramaditya.
So you were speaking about frigates, corvettes. Can you give us a classification, basically how the surface level Navy is organized? What are these corvettes, frigates? To our viewers, I'm pretty sure even they'll be much interested to know about how the Navy is organized, what kind of how the fleets have been classified.
Okay, so I used a word called carrier battle group. So in Indian Navy, we have certain high value assets. So an aircraft carrier, oil tanker, these are all high value assets. So again, the role of these assets is not primarily warfare. So an aircraft carrier is like a floating airbase. So it's like you have a floating airbase miles and miles, hundreds of nautical miles into the ocean. So from these floating air bases, our fighter aircraft can take off. So it's like, let's say a ship has a radar and it has a capability of detecting a threat 100 nautical miles away.
Okay.
So while a ship can detect a potential enemy threat 100 nautical miles away, we have an helicopter that is dedicated for airborne early warning.
Okay.
So that helicopter is born on this sea platform. It could be a destroyer or a frigate. So this destroyer flows or sails 100 nautical mile into the ocean. So he has a range of 100 nautical mile. Now our helicopter takes off at that point 100 nautical mile from the base, and he has a radar which in turn can detect a threat 100 nautical mile away. So in a sense, the ship's radar can detect up to 100 nautical mile. So my helicopter goes to the threshold of the ship's radar. So that is 100 nautical mile away, and he switches on his radar, and his radar can pick up threats 100 nautical mile away. So in a sense, the ship is getting information about targets that are 200 nautical mile away, although his capability is only 100 nautical mile. So this is just an example of how we operate. Now coming back to the carrier battle group. So as I mentioned, Vikramaditya does not have too much of warfare and missiles and arms and guns to attack enemy. Vikramaditya is not meant for that purpose. Neither is an oil tanker. Oil tanker is meant to carry loads and loads of fuel so that the Navy's endurance can be more. You all would have heard of this concept called Blue Water Navy.
Yes.
So right now, Indian Navy is operating in the Indian Ocean region and operating to certain hundreds of nautical miles. But our intent is to go beyond what we are operating or venture into the blue waters, that is into the Indo-Pacific region. So for this reason, we need to have a lot of reserves. We need to have a lot of fuel operating us. So there are dedicated oil tankers, INS Shakti, INS Jyoti, INS Aditya, whose sole purpose is to carry fuel and go along with these aircraft so that they can keep replenishing these aircraft at sea. Now, if I fill up an oil tanker with too much of ammunition, then it doesn't serve the purpose. So a carrier battle group means you have an aircraft carrier with fighter aircraft that is meant for striking the enemy. Then you have an oil tanker that is meant for replenishment. Now comes the firepower. So you have a destroyer. I have served on board a destroyer. So there was more space for missiles and guns on board the aircraft than for people. So that's how it is meant to be. So you have anti-submarine weapons, you have torpedoes, you have air-to-air, you have surface-to-air missiles, you have surface-to-surface missiles, all huge ones, by the way, twice as how long we are. So these are destroyers and they are meant to serve as a protection to the aircraft carrier and to the oil tanker. So let's say we have an incoming missile threat. Let's say we have an incoming aircraft threat. So these platforms, so the destroyers, they are equipped with sensors, they're equipped with radars, they're equipped with sonars for detecting aircraft activity as well as submarine activity. And these form the face of protection for these aircraft carriers. A simple corollary is chess. So in chess, we have a king, we have a queen, we have a knight, we have a bishop, and we have an elephant. So do you straight away launch your queen or elephant or launch your queen or king into the attack while attacking the opponent? No. You have your destroyers in the name of knights. You have your corvettes in the name of bishops. And you have your frigates in the name of rook. So these are the guys who go over there and expose the enemy lines. So they carry out whatever damage they can. So again, they serve as an attacking front, they serve as a defense front, and they make way for the queen or the high value assets to come through and give the final strike or deliver the final strike.
So you are telling the aircraft carrier is like the king and the oil tankers is like the queen.
Yeah, he's the king, and I can say the MiGs on board the aircraft carrier are the queen. So king always carries the queen. So aircraft carrier always carries these aircraft which are.
And as you said, the corvettes. What are the corvettes and frigates? I didn't get that.
So there are three classes of ships, broad classification. So one is destroyers, one is corvettes, and one is frigates. So these are mainly classified based on the length of the ship. So destroyers are generally longer. So a longer size of the ship means more firepower. So generally in a destroyer you will find that there are weapons and systems that cater to air threat, that cater to surface threat,
Yes.
and that cater to underwater or submarine threat.
Okay.
Whereas when it comes to frigates, you may not have sensors and systems encompassing all these capabilities. So a particular frigate or frigates are longer than corvettes. So corvettes, by virtue of being smaller in size, are meant for a quick maneuver and quick response and quick reaction. So in case of a threat, these are the guys who can get into the battle zone or
Yes.
into the zone quickly.
Yes.
So next comes the frigate. So a corvette, so since he's designed and developed to move faster into the area of operation or into the area of threat, he has certain limitations. So he may have certain 1 or 2 surface to surface or 1 or 2 surface to air missiles. He may not have an underwater platform, and his guns, he'll be having mounted gun platforms. So it may not cater to a range of hundreds of nautical miles, but he is meant for immediate battle. So next comes your frigates, which are slightly more powerful when it comes to the range and capability of attack. And then comes our destroyers, who's an all-in-one package. So these are the guys who flow out. So I missed the submarine arm, by the way. So so far I was talking only about the surface navy, about frigates, about corvettes, about destroyers. So we have an underwater navy as well. So when a carrier battle group is out, it is a complete demonstration of power of surface navy, of subsurface navy. Our submarines also go out, and our aircraft. So as I mentioned, we have LRMR aircraft, long range maritime reconnaissance aircraft. So P8Is, ILs, TUs. So these go out and they ensure that the environment is militarily safe for our high value assets to step in.
That
so
is,
we had a
that is what you do in the drills, I guess.
Correct.
You go out as a company.
Correct. So that is what we had very recently. India displayed its prowess. India displayed its power of 2 twin carrier battle groups. So twin carrier battle groups. So we had Vikramaditya along with his carrier battle group. We had Vikrant with his carrier battle group. So that was a culmination or a strong combination of the Western Naval Command and the Eastern Naval Command operating in unison. So that has, I have to say that you all would have seen the video that was released by the Indian Navy. I think it speaks for itself.
Okay. So you were telling about the aircraft carriers. So when you see an aircraft carrier, you're telling it doesn't carry any ammunition, and only jets are there. Okay. So basically, the aircraft carrier, when I see it's so huge, and it's there only to station the jets and a runway for the jets. Is there no use of an aircraft carrier?
Okay. So I'll give you a very simple corollary.
Okay.
So what is the size of a normal car that you see on the road? It is about few meters in length.
Yes.
But you would have stepped into a service center. So how big is a service center? What is the ratio and proportion between a car to its service center? Now
and an elephant.
Exactly. Yes. So now you have a car. So you need basic requirements for a car. Certain minimal electrical requirements, certain chassis requirements, certain painting requirements. So accordingly you have a proportionate service center.
True.
But now think of a 4++ generation fighter aircraft with state-of-the-art avionics.
So you're telling that the maintenance is also carried along with the...
Exactly. So
oh my God.
Now,
okay.
Let's say your car goes bad. India is a proliferating country. You have Maruti Suzuki service centers, for example, in many parts of the country.
Yes.
But do we have many such service centers in many parts in the ocean?
No,
we don't have. And can we come back every time to the base for servicing requirements?
No.
So I'll give you a simple example. In MiG, we have a certain equipment and system which is so advanced that the pilot wears a helmet. And I bring a corollary to a cartoon called SWAT Cats. If you guys know about it.
Yes.
So there were these two cats flying there with their state-of-the-art jet.
Yes.
So they used to have a helmet with a visor, and on the visor they used to see their targets, missiles and everything. So MiG is an equivalent of a SWAT Cat's jet. I'm not lying about it. It's actually like a SWAT Cat's jet. And when a pilot wears his helmet and visor, he sees the targets on his visor, and that target and that circle is synchronized to his eye. So when a pilot moves his eyeball, the target and the marks over there, the markers move along with his eye movement. And wherever the pilot sees, let's say the pilot sees to his left, the marker on the visor moves to the left and the associated machinery. So generally if a pilot is engaging a target, what are the basic systems that get involved. So this we have something called a target designation system.
Okay.
Simple words, designating the target. So when a pilot sees an enemy aircraft to the left, so his eyeball moves to the left. So the cursor on the visor also moves to the left. Now the radar that is tracking the aircraft enemy, so that also starts moving to the left.
Okay.
And the missile tuning and testing, that the missile has a homing head. It has its own inbuilt radar. So initially what happens, the aircraft's radar, by virtue of being more powerful and more potent, tracks the target, and he gives the target information to the radar on board the missile, which has certain limitations. What is the role of a missile? It has to get launched. It has a very minimum flight time. It has to go and engage the target or hit the target. So its electronics are limited. So the radar of the aircraft gives information about the threat to the radar of the missile. And so what happens when a pilot just moves his eyeball to the left, the cursor or the tracker on the visor, the radar of the aircraft, the radar of the missile, everything are following the pilot.
They also move to the...
So now imagine if you need a maintenance facility, a servicing facility to ensure that all these systems are in place and work efficiently, because we are talking about a war here. One small mistake can lead to loss of life, loss of property, loss of assets and so on. And it's an unbearable burden for any armed forces personnel to even think about it. So Vikramaditya is like a huge service center at sea. It has all the facilities. First of all, it has to cater to the ship's requirement. Now you would have all seen the video of Vikramaditya landing on board the aircraft carrier. So there are three ropes on the aircraft carrier. So when the aircraft comes for landing, he releases a tail hook behind. So this tail hook is supposed to get engaged or caught in the rope of Vikramaditya, and that's how the carrier is arrested. Now you have a runway. Generally, an aircraft, a civil aircraft, has almost about 2.5 kilometers of distance available for takeoff. But how much do we have on Vikramaditya? Just 300 meters. Just 300 meters.
In 300 meters, the jets are taking off.
Yes, they are taking off in just 300 meters and they are landing in less than 100 meters. So when an aircraft lands, you have at least a couple of kilometers for it to arrest. So when the aircraft is coming for landing, first of all, is the ship a plain landing surface? No, it's on water.
It's always,
rolling,
there's a
pitching, yawing. And above that, aerodynamics and wind direction, wind velocity influence the landing characteristics to a great extent. So the ship has to be so precise in its navigation, in its speed to comfort the aircraft in landing. Any small out of phase, any small mismatch or out of phase between the aircraft landing parameters and the ship's parameters can lead to distress, can lead to a great amount of damage.
Can crash into the ship itself.
Exactly. So on the other hand, so we always have a crash and salvage team that is in spare capacity and prepared for any eventuality. So I was just explaining what are the kind of facilities an aircraft carrier has. Now imagine a MiG-29K fighter aircraft which can travel to twice the speed of sound, and he's coming for landing at around 200 to 250 kmph. So imagine the kind of mechanism that is required to arrest the speed. On a normal civil runway, you have 2 kilometers for the aircraft to slow down. But here you don't even have 100 meters. So you can see that the engines operate in certain modes. Like you have in our simple Maruti Suzuki car, you have a turbo mode. Likewise, in our MiG, we have something called afterburner mode. We have something called a combat mode. So not only combustion takes place inside the engine, but also outside the engine as well, because it has to generate that much of thrust for that 3000 kg aircraft to take off in just 300 meters.
Got it.
So now imagine. So I highlighted these capabilities so that you can imagine what is the kind of maintenance requirement. If you have a small car with 4 wheels and certain basic chassis going on road, and it has such a big proportionate service center,
definitely.
Then imagine the kind of requirement for one aircraft. Now we all know that Indian Navy has 45 MiG aircraft. And when we sail out with at least with a number of aircraft equivalent to 40 or 50, just imagine what is the kind of...
If you are sailing out with 30 to 40 aircraft, I get it. The amount of service center. No, the skillmanship of the pilots, the skillmanship of the sailors, everything comes into play.
Correct.
How, like, when we see Vikramaditya, it's huge, we know. How tall is Vikramaditya, if you have to compare?
Okay. So again, I'll try to give you a civil parlance so that you can visualize it better. So Vikramaditya is equivalent to a 22-storied building. And
Oh
by the
my
way,
God.
one more oh my God fact is, at least 12 floors of it is underwater.
Huh?
So that's how it is. In ships, we have something called decks or floors.
Okay.
Where these equipments, where crew equipments are positioned, crew resting stations are maintained, and crew operation centers are maintained.
Okay.
So Vikramaditya is equivalent to a 22-storied building. What you see when you just see when you see Vikramaditya, you see the runway and you see a small structure next to it. That's called a superstructure.
Okay.
So that itself has around 10 floors in it. But in all, Vikramaditya is equivalent to a 22-storied building.
Oh my God, that's really huge. Now, coming to the opposite of a aircraft carrier, submarines. You have been in a submarine, sir.
Yeah, although I'm a aircraft technical officer, but yes, as a part of our basic training, we are given exposure to all the three dimensions of aviation, as I mentioned: submarine, ships, and
aircraft. So when we see these movies and when we see these submarines, like the Ghazi attack, all these movies, we feel submarine life, like it is it's shown in a way where all the officers are together. It's a very comfortable space, and it's very nice to go underwater and as you say, reconnaissance of these missions. How was your experience when you were in the submarine?
Okay. So I'm not very sure who told you inside a submarine is comfortable.
It's my assumption.
Okay. So a submarine is a very compact equipment. In fact, okay, I'll straight away come to this point. So a submarine there are diesel electric submarines, there are various types of submarines. So there are these battery compartments. Okay. Now, do you know where the officers and men's resting stations are in a submarine? They are right below the battery compartment.
Okay.
That's the only available space that is there inside the submarine for people to rest themselves. Okay. So it is a very compact space, and I can tell you what holds a submarine together is the camaraderie and the bonding that the shipmates have. See, because once you're inside the water, you do not have any access to the outside world. You do not have any, of course, you have the military communication, but in general, the crew, they do not have any access or communication to the outer world.
They're stuck in a place.
Yeah,
basically.
so is their experience on board ships as well. So it is a very closely knitted company, a well-knitted community, I can say, minimal crew. Okay. Who live for each other and who can die for each other. So what is very essential in a submarine is that mental courage, that mental stamina to withstand days and months of deployment with limited resources, under pressure, under stress, in a hostile environment. So it takes a lot to be a submariner, and our brothers in arms are really doing justice to the submarine arm.
So in general, if I have to paint a good picture of
So see, first of all, we are traveling hundreds of feet below the water, inside water. So we all know as we go down the depth, the pressure increases.
Yes.
So a submarine is built in such a manner to withstand these pressures. There are certain chambers, and you can't have a very big submarine again because it gives out certain signatures. So the acoustic waves that are sent out by sonars and other sonobuoys that are trying to hunt these submarines bank upon the fact that a submarine has a larger surface area to reflect. So a submarine, just like a ship or an aircraft, is kept to the minimum size possible.
The smaller the submarine, it's better because it won't get detected. Yes.
So again, now coming back to civil parlance, if you're a let's say 5.5 feet guy and you want to go and use the washroom, you can't use the washroom standing straight. So that's how small these facilities are. So we are
5.5 feet.
Yeah.
Means you're always bending down and operating.
Yes, you're always bent. So generally the way these ships or submarines or aircraft are built is, you have the airframe, you know that beyond a certain threshold, your aircraft gives out a signature and starts compromising on its stealth. In simple road tax only, now we know that we have a sedan, if it crosses a certain length, then the amount of tax on it is more. But here we are talking about stealth and not tax. So they are generally populated with the systems and equipments and all the infrastructure that is required to operate efficiently the platform. So whatever remaining spaces here and there we have is what end up becoming crew stations and crew interaction rooms. So in a submarine, I can say it's very luxurious. Like for the example, a washroom is very luxurious. So you have a ceiling that's just about 5.5 feet tall. For someone who is 6 feet tall and is really required to use the washroom, he's going to have a luxurious experience. That's how I would like.
So if you're saying the height is 5.5 feet or tall, it's like the people are always bent, the people are always, moving around in a bent manner.
Correct.
And they go in submarine for months?
Yes, it depends on the nature of deployment. They go for months and hundreds of nautical miles into this.
That is crazy. That is seriously crazy. That life is really difficult.
Yes, and people, so these equipments are not like, okay, I watch TV from morning till evening and I switch off the TV and give it rest. No, these equipments have to be running 24/7. So we have something called a watch system. So generally the ship's complement or the ship's team is divided into three. So people work for 8 hours and they are given a rest of 16 hours because fatigue, stress, physical stress, mental fatigue has a heavy toll on the efficiency of the crew, on the efficiency of the platform. So we have a watch system, red, blue and white. So at any point of time, we have one watch manning all the systems of the submarine. And we have, that is 1/3 of the people are always manning the equipment, and we generally have 2/3 of the people resting. But resting doesn't mean they're not available. So in ship, we generally have 3 states of readiness, like in a state of war. So one is called state blue, wherein we are out on a surveillance mission, or we have not been given any threat information or any compromise, any security compromise situation. So we are out there, we are doing we are executing or discharging our role and responsibility. Then we have something called state orange, where we have some hint that something is brewing up there and we need to be prepared. Yes. So obviously, in a situation like orange, we can't have 2/3 of the people resting. True. So that also has, so the amount of manning, as we call it, the manning the stations is more. So I can again correlate it to an OPD and an emergency in a hospital. So generally you have an OPD from morning till evening and you don't have OPD in the evening. But yes. Is an emergency like that? No. Emergency is manned 24/7. You have all sorts of skilled manpower available there, from a doctor to a nurse to a technician to everybody. And you have all the basic equipments required to cater to an emergency available over there. So it is a similar setup in a submarine or any military platform for that matter, where we have 3 states of readiness and we man accordingly.
Okay, great. Submarine life is a crazy experience then. I am really admiring our Navy, especially when you speak about submarine life and, people going for long, being in that state of readiness with that mental fatigue. Oh my God. And when I think, we guys sit over here nicely, binge watch Netflix and I compare ourselves to them, hats off to them, man. Seriously, hats off to the Navy crew. The amount of stress that goes into the job.
Yeah, I will just add a statement here. So, one submarine, now India is creating an ecosystem to promote self-reliance in indigenization. Yes. So, I was coming to the I'll just complete this. So, we are, indigenization, Atmanirbhar Bharat are the war cries for today's government. Yes. And the policies are framed towards creating a nice ecosystem for this. Yes. So, when you compare yourself with an armed forces personnel, now an armed forces personnel is working on board a ship or an aircraft or or a submarine. So, a submarine, where are these ships built? Where is the revenue that goes into shipbuilding, that goes into aircraft construction coming from? So, it is coming from your toilage, it is coming from your hard work,
But not
it is
definitely
coming
me.
from your contribution on a daily basis to the economy of the country, to the GDP of the country.
Yes.
So, if you have a thankful, definitely you're expressing your thankful nature to us. So, I would like to reciprocate and reiterate with a equally thankful nature. Thank you.
This just shows how the humility that our officers have. We never thought from that perspective, but definitely, yeah, paying taxes, all this, doing our duties does help the armed forces.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So you are the power behind our punch.
see, but no amount of money can ever compute to the work that they do, because they're staking their lives over there and they're leaving their families and going there for months. I don't think any amount of money that we give will be equal to their efforts, but it is really generous of a Navy officer to even think on those terms. But yeah, now coming back to this, you spoke about Atmanirbhar Bharat, indigenization of defense equipments. Even today, you have been manning a MiG-29K. It's a Russian-made one. What are the difficulties that we generally face? Why are we not able to get our own aircraft done? Or why are we still, at least those parts, everything procurement that is happening, why don't we replicate what is there in a MiG-29K? Because we have the aircraft and we are good in reverse engineering. Indians are known for reverse engineering. Why don't we reverse engineer and build our own aircrafts?
So the one word answer to your question is Tejas. LCA Tejas.
LCA Tejas.
And the one word, so we have so many aircraft carrier Vikramaditya has also been imported from Russia.
Yes,
And
it's a remodeled ship.
indigenization initiative, again, my one word answer to you is Vikrant.
Yes.
So we are there. The present government has realized the importance of being, of having and promoting self-reliance in this, in defense production, and it is creating an ecosystem for agencies such as DRDO to interact with startups who are gaining specialization in
Defense equipment.
defense equipment, defense sensors, and so on. So what the government, in my understanding, is doing is it is easing out barriers and creating or bridging the gaps between erstwhile agencies which have been responsible and tasked with this purpose, such as DPSUs, such as HAL, BEL, DRDO labs, such as Aeronautical Development Agency, Aeronautical Development Establishment, ISRO, and so on. Today, we have private companies who are making satellites, whereas this a couple of decades ago was only the charter of ISRO.
Yes.
So I am very confident that this ecosystem is getting closer, it is getting stronger, and it is only getting better. So just like I mentioned, in a submarine, it is the camaraderie of the men on board the ship that holds it together. I think it is the association or the bonding that is being promoted, that is being created. Avenues for self-reliance are getting promoted. So we have various schemes of the government, such as IDEX. IDEX is Innovation for Defense Excellence. Then we have a TDEX scheme. Then we have Make in India schemes, Make 1, Make 2, Make 3. All these are promoted at fostering the talent, the technology that is resident in India. Maybe for some reason they were not able to surface and translate into a deliverable. That is what I think this government's Make in India schemes, Government of India, Atmanirbhar Bharat schemes are aimed at. And we have the result in front of us, LCA Tejas and Vikramaditya. So this combination, and Vikrant, I'm sorry. So this is the combination that we will very soon be seeing as a replication of Vikramaditya and MiGs. So Vikramaditya and MiGs, by the advent of indigenization, is translating into Vikrant and LCA, in which the government of India would be presenting to the world very soon.
Okay. It's a good thing that, on ground you're able to see so much of changes.
Yes.
Because we read it in newspapers, but on ground we don't know what the reality is. Make in India in defense is being pushed from 10 years almost now, approximately 9 years. So in the last, you have been there from 10 years. So in the last 9 years, you must have seen a lot of changes happening with respect to indigenization. Definitely, indigenization is visible with respect to Vikrant and all. But still, 10 years down the line, we are still slow, is what I feel. Indigenization process is going slow. We see many initiatives, but it's been 10 years, and see so many defense joint ventures have happened. Tatas are getting into defense. They are making some defense equipment. You have your Reliance also, which tried to do it. Reliance owned by Anil Ambani. They are also getting into this. But we find, that the process has been slow. Have you had any experiences with respect to this? Like, why is the process still slow? Though we find a vibrant political ecosystem urging to have make in India with respect to defense.
So I'll put it this way. So consider indigenization as a project. So generally, what are the different phases in a project? First, you have an initiation phase, then you have a planning phase, then you have an execution phase, then based on the feedback, then you have a control phase or a monitoring and the feedback phase. So so I can say that for at least half a decade, from this point onwards, going many phases. So from this point on, if you go 50 years back, you see people did not even have the thought that probably I can make something in India on my own. But today, 50 years later, see where we are. We have an aircraft carrier of our own, and that is not within the wherewithal of many of the nations in the world.
True.
So what I would like to highlight here is, so naturally when we are doing something for a first time, for the procedure to consolidate, for the system to
One second. Just for our users, as he said, the aircraft carriers are not the wherewithal of all the countries. That is very much true. There are only 14 countries in the world which has aircraft carriers. USA tops the list with 11 carriers, and India comes in China, all these come in the second with 2 aircraft carriers. So definitely building an aircraft carrier, maintaining an aircraft carrier is not a cup of tea. Only skilled personnel and the country's commitments can push that forward. Yes, sorry sir, I interrupted you. You can resume your speech.
No problem. Yeah, that's a very valid input, and thanks for completing my part of the sentence. Ideally, I should have told you, but thank you.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, it is a first-time activity of consolidating a project. It is a first-time activity, and once the system consolidates, then things will become far more smooth, far more optimized, and far more fast. Now, here there are 2 major agencies involved. So one is the end customer, three major I might say. So end customer, Navy for example, then the designer, as you mentioned about Tata and L&T and Reliance. So they are the suppliers, and there is a bureaucracy angle or a bureaucracy setup that is there in between, and to add optimization to the system. So we naval personnel are mainly specialized in technical fields, in executive fields, and our purpose is to deliver on time. But we may not be privy of various administrative and financial aspects that go into this procurement process, for example. So let's say I have to buy a particular system. So what happens is there are generally delegation of powers. So whilst our naval personnel have some powers of their own, but for procurement of a high value or beyond certain thresholds, a bureaucratic angle or Indian Defence Account Services angle comes into the picture.
The IDAS service comes into play. If there is a procurement happening beyond a point.
Yeah. So at every, you can see that there is a delegated financial authority or an integrated financial authority co-located with every major procurement arena of defense.
So the basically Defence Account Service live with you in the basis.
Exactly. So what happens is, in my experience, since you asked me to quote my experience, I only speak on my experience that I have pursued procurement and repair of various systems which were earlier being supplied from foreign OEMs. But when we tried to get into the Make in India loop and repair in India loop, I realized that there are certain out of phases with respect to the technology or with respect to the need and urgency. So everything happens on paper. So I make a statement.
Are you speaking about bureaucratic red tapeism? Because it's sounding like you're trying to quote it.
So You are the master to give words to this. I will only share my experience.
Okay.
You can use a word or adapt a word that you deem fit.
Okay.
So what I would say is, so when I make a statement of my case and say that, okay, now I have an aircraft and this system has become vintage, it is no longer meeting my today's requirement.
Okay.
So I need to upgrade my avionics, and there are defense PSUs, there are DRDO labs and private players who can bid for this. So I need to approach them. So the process of generally these systems are expensive and it goes beyond the power of a naval fraternity or an armed forces fraternity.
Right.
So I have to go all the way to the Indian Defense Account Services, not for scrutiny directly, but for guidance. So they have been trained in a particular manner to give us financial insights, to give us administrative insights. So we have to go to our UPSC qualified officers for the aspect of guidance and a financial perspective. But when we go there, what I have experienced is maybe there is a out of phase between our technical requirements and our urgency of requirements and their operating principles and standard operating procedures.
Okay.
So I can just quote a particular example wherein I had given a statement of case and I had indicated the technical requirements that I presently have not meeting my requirement and what I want. And this is the cost. So when we approached the IDAs, so they had observations such as, why is this system so expensive? Why can't we get the thing going with a less costlier system?
Okay.
Or if I go to them and let's say I go to them with the idea of getting the system from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited or Bharat Electronics Limited, for example, then they have certain observations that these DPSUs are coming up with technology, but there are private players who have probably surpassed these agencies in certain aspects. So why don't you go to them? So generally, if I go to them and recommend a solution that I need to approach A, they tend to tell me to go to B. And if I go to them with a solution B, then they tend to redirect me to A.
Okay, they keep asking you to come out with more solutions.
Yeah. So I believe that there are several rounds of ideation.
But isn't it, they should also be, technically, they should also know. Because you were telling me a story just, behind the scenes, that you had gone to a defense accounts officer and you were trying to, procure a booster system or something for the flight. Right. And you told him, he was listening well. And then at the end, he's like, these boosters go on jet, right? He was asking this question. So when you told that to me, I felt that, maybe there is a certain technical gap in what
Correct.
the bureaucracy knows about.
Correct.
And when they're dealing with the Navy, I think this is getting reflected.
Correct. So all I have to say in this regard is probably they're also seeing such cases and such requirements for the first time. So that takes me back to my initial statement.
Booster is something that everyone knows. It has to go on a jet.
So I'll just go back to my initial statement that these procedures, these processes are continuously refining themselves. So we are also trying our best to give the people, to give our approving authorities a first-hand appreciation and a first-hand information. So I've had several instances wherein I have got the IDS officers to visit our aircraft. I have taken them on board our aircraft. I have made them sit in our cockpit and I have told them that these are the challenges that I'm facing and these are the solutions that I'm looking forward to. And the HAL, Bell, yes, they have been the pioneers for us. But they cannot be a one-stop solution with today's revolution in technology. So that is why, like we say, when we invest in shares and stocks, we don't put all our eggs in one basket. Yes. We distribute our eggs in various baskets. So I believe that this is the approach we need to take. Today's, thanks to the government of India and its initiatives, the private players are coming up in plenty, and trust me, these guys are amazing when it comes to their understanding and implementation of technology. So I feel we need to enter into strategic industry partnerships. So we have DPSUs like HL and Bell, we have DRDO labs, we have private players, and now academia, IITs, IIMs, These are
There's a collaboration that's going on.
These are the treasure houses of our knowledge, of our capability in India. And I'm very proud of where we are today. So I recommend that we establish strategic industrial partnerships with all these areas, whilst genuinely, like from our end, as I mentioned, we genuinely made the officer understand firsthand what are the challenges that we are facing. So once the officer realized this, then an equal and like Newton's third law, an equal but not opposite, an equal and same force came from the opposite, from the IDA's side, and we were able to very quickly thereafter take the project to its fruitful conclusion. So yes, we are seeing things for the first time, whilst the efforts on both the sides is very much aimed towards self-reliance and towards standing on our own feet. There are certain, we have come from the British imperial rule, so there are certain standard operating procedures, there are laid down procedures, but we are continuously redefining itself. A simple example, so you see the crest on my t-shirt, right? So this is the naval ensign. So what it used to be until the inauguration of Vikrant was a St. George's cross with a naval ensign somewhere in one of the quadrants. So this came for almost 75 years.
Yeah, there was a change in the insignia.
So today what we have is the Maratha ensign that we have with its naval emblem and ensign. Things are changing.
So definitely. We are moving away from the colonial mindset.
Exactly. I believe that the entire country is focusing and is genuinely having this desire to see a more empowered India. So all of us are putting efforts towards that. Yes, there are certain administrative challenges, but we are all working towards that. And as I mentioned, so we have crossed that project initiation and planning phase. We are in that execution phase. Things are getting streamlined by the minute. And I am very sure that down the line, it is once that system is consolidated and establishment, we are only going to fly. It's like you travel in a particular route on one fine day. On the first day, you don't know the route exactly. So you may use GPS. You may make a note of various potholes, various humps, various shops that are there on the way. Second day, yes. Third day, yes. And then the fourth day, you don't need GPS. So that is what we are heading towards. And I am very confident in the way that, and it's a collaborative effort by all the agencies, the government, the industry, the defense industry, the armed forces. It's a team effort, and we are congregating as one towards seeing a more empowered India.
Very nicely put. No, you painted a very good vision, like how the industry today it's coming together, how the private sector is coming together, how the government is coming together, and how the defense industry as well as the defense personnel, how they are coming together and strengthening the security of India. But coming to the security aspect, when I speak of security for India, the first country that comes to the mind is China.
Correct.
We always look at China as as the one which is trying to contain India.
Okay.
Especially with the string of pearls, which where China has built all these naval bases surrounding India. How does army look at this? Like, if there is a situation of war, let's say with China, how do you plan to, tackle the string of pearls? Because they've built navy bases. One is there in Gwadar port, one is there here, now Hambantota, and you have Colombo. Another you have in Chittagong. And the other one is in the Myanmar Islands, QQ. So when you see this, encircling of China, and especially building bases, China is building bases in Indian Ocean. One they have built in Djibouti. Am I right? Yeah. And one again in Maldives, I know.
So the answer to this would be that India plays the role of a balancing power in this changing geopolitical scenario.
Okay.
Our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has very aptly quoted that we cannot have our past baggages hanging on our head all the time. So in Navy, we have a very common statement that there are no permanent friends or no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So I can't say that in the past, Ukraine did not help me in one particular instance, so I will not support Kai. So we have to leverage each other's challenges and opportunities and grow as a family. So India today in the Indian Ocean region is playing the role of a balancing power. So, and China realizes this. So they are probably trying to influence the countries in the Indian Ocean region by getting into partnerships, by giving them aid in their time of distress, and so on. So all I can say is that we have a very strong military and diplomatic mindset that is looking at this issue. So I would mention that, and I would introduce the forum to one more word called theater commands. So
Okay.
earlier, Indian Navy, Indian Army, and Indian Air Force probably functioned as mostly separate entities. But
yeah.
now, with late General Rawat's thought process, CDA has been formed.
Yes.
CDS has been formed. So earlier we had Chief of Army Staff, Air Staff, and Naval Staff, but now we have a department called Department of Military Affairs, headed by the Chief of the Defense Staff.
Yes.
So this is aimed at creating a theater command.
Integrated theater command.
Yeah, it is an integrated theater command.
All three forces come in.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So your question, how?
We didn't have this till now.
So once again, we had it, but now it is getting revolutionized. It is getting fueled. It is getting boosted.
Okay.
So we are more closer to realizing what a theater command is. Okay. And once this is done, we would see one fine day that this is no more a naval base, or this is no more an army base, or this is no more an air force base. It is a strategic base. Yes. So if I say that side, South China Sea side, let's say we have a strategic base where you can see that there is a naval contingent of ships, you can see that there is an air force contingent of aircraft, and you can see that there is a army contingent of, let's say, special forces who can embark these naval assets, or who can embark the air assets and deliver what is required and beyond. So I will, this is how I would answer that. The answer to where we are tackling on a military note to the China, let's say, probably debating its command over the sea, its right over the sea, the littoral, the influence. So this is how we are tackling it. And India has always proliferated this thought of Vasundhaiva Kutumbakam. So we may not be very finicky, very cranky when it comes to this, but yes, we realize that people are not taking their share of the pie, but are trying to encroach on other share of the pie as well. So you can see that the buildup of assets is such that we are prepared to answer any questions.
You were speaking of the pie. That's why I was coming to the point. Why Indian Ocean? Because see, China opens up to Pacific Ocean. Correct. There is even the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, Atlantic Ocean is where they should be, because you find that the Western countries, the most dominant economies are nestled around the Atlantic Ocean. Correct. But why China is trying to, establish itself as a superpower? Why is it trying to man the lanes of navigation and, trying to make a right over these passages that is there in the Indian Ocean? Why do you think this is the scenario?
Okay, my simple answer to this would be, all of us realize that 80% of the trade in the world, not in the Indian Ocean region, happens in the Indian Ocean region. 80%. Yes. Okay. So this becomes a region of not just
huge trade and commerce, yes,
not just economic interest, social interest, political interest, technological interest, the reserves. Now with advent of technology, we have realized, and slowly oil is also losing its value. Black gold is losing its value. We are migrating into numerous renewable sources of energy, wind energy, solar energy, water energy, and we are trying to tap into the natural resources by virtue of it being economically and culturally clean and environmentally friendly. So you can see the advent of activities in the Indian Ocean region tapping into the natural resources, be it installing windmills, be it installing all these avenues for generating energy. Yes. So I've just quoted one example. So Indian Ocean region is not just a region of economic interest alone. It is a region of
it's a region of civilizations.
Yes, it is a civilization. So naturally, all the neighboring countries, not only in the Indian Ocean region but in the Pacific, have realized its importance, and everyone are trying to bid for their stakes in this region. So that is how the diplomatic angle in the world is building up. You see so many joint exercises being pulled out between various navies and the various counterparts. So these are all hinting towards how resource rich and how influential this Indian Ocean region is.
Is going to be definitely, even with US having its own naval base in Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia,
Correct.
right? So do you actually in the future see a situation, because US has been collaborating so much with India with respect to sharing of resources, all that? Do you think we'll get access to Diego Garcia where we can go and park our ships? Just a out of the blue question.
So now you realize, okay, the other converse of what you asked has already become true. So L&T, along with, I'm not able to recollect that firm in Spain. So both of them have entered into a joint venture to service and provide all sorts of support to US naval ships. So that no, I'm saying in India. So you're asking about Indian naval ships in US. So I'm talking about US naval ships in India. So the converse of it has already come to light. With L&T holding the torch for this. So I would not say.
So we are even becoming good in what you call as MRO, maintenance, repair, and overall.
Correct.
So India, I did hear that India is becoming a hub for MRO activities.
Correct.
With respect to flights is what I heard. I didn't know with respect to ships.
Correct. Also, so I'll come back to your question. So the converse of what you have asked has become true. So by the idioms of probability, I would say that your question would also see light of the day that, yeah, we have had various exercises where we've been to France, Japan, exercise Varuna, exercise Tropics. We've been to all other countries and we have stationed there. And see, that's how we work as a joint navy. See, because we should be able to leverage the strengths and weaknesses of our other friendly navy platforms. So I have myself, when we've been in one of these exercises, I have myself been on board an Australian ship. I have been on board a French ship when we have done these exercises. We have seen how they operate, how they approach a particular situation, and we have done a comparative analysis of how we do it. We have brainstormed and we have come out with a standard SOP where all of us will benefit into a win-win situation. So the converse of it is true, but I would again make this statement that there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies.
There are only permanent interests. Yes, this was given by Kautilya actually. Kautilya stated this. So definitely, with respect to security, when you see the Indian Navy, we do find that there's a lot of indigenization that's happened compared to what's happening with respect to the Air Force or the Army. We do find large-scale indigenization has been more prominently seen in Navy.
Okay.
Now, coming to the other threat, Pakistan.
Okay.
How threatening is Pakistan's Navy?
Okay. So I would highlight your attention to the battles that we've had in the past. Operation Vijay, Python, Trident, and all these operations in 1971. So at 1971, if we were at that stature when compared to our enemy, then with so many bright things and so many pushes happening in today's time, just imagine where we can be.
Okay.
So I will not go into the specifics. I'm not permitted to say so. But all my understanding is that there are bigger players in this chessboard.
So it's almost like
I don't think when
Pakistan is no player anymore.
So that is what I would like to hint. He probably is a pawn in the chessboard that a king or a queen or a bishop behind is leveraging upon. That is my.
So India is no longer a pawn. India has become the queen or the king of the Indian Ocean.
But with our advancement in weapon technology, like the latest, we have a BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. We have Agni 3 missile coming up. We have a missile coming up of whose name is Sagarika. Yeah, Barak is already there. Sagarika. These ranges are of the order of 1500 kilometer, and everyone in the world knows what is the nautical mile distance between India and Pakistan, or India and China for that matter. So I would end my answer on this note that the ecosystem in India, the notions, the ideals in India are so powerful that we are somewhere else. We know, we have all heard about the political crisis, about the economic crisis in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh. So India has always been on the giving end and has always tried to balance out these unfortunate geopolitical scenarios. We are playing the role of a balancing power, and we are not here to gain supremacy or become a dictator. As I mentioned, Indians believe in live and let live, and we don't want to see only ourselves happy. We want to see everyone happy. So we
Nice
always
slip up.
function with
Yeah,
these
definitely.
ideas.
Nice slip up.
But of course, if someone is trying to meddle out with our peace and prosperity, then we are not someone who would sit silent on that as well.
So, in effect, you just summarize the culture of India. Ahimso paramo dharmaha, tata himsa paro damaha. Means we are non-violent as long as we live peacefully. But you meddle with us, you'll see the other face.
Yeah. So same goes with Shanno Varuna also. See, Shanno Varuna does not tell. It says, "May the ocean god Lord Varuna be auspicious unto us." We don't say, "Give me amazing strength to conquer the world" or anything like that. So we are India, and we are really proud to be Indians.
Definitely. Now, okay, we have got a very good view of the Navy, everything. So we'll come to the end of this.
Okay.
Before I end, I would like to ask, there'll be particular experiences that you would have had in Navy, especially experiences where in the middle of the night you wake up, you still remember that thing. Okay, this has happened. Oh my God, this is something that's crazy event has happened. Can you just tell us one of your experiences on
Yeah,
this?
very gladly. So, in Bangalore, when I used to be here before I joined the Navy, we used to go out on night outs occasionally. But here, we used to go out on night outs for having some hot snacks and having a good time with family and friends.
Yes.
In Navy also, we used to go out on night outs, and not occasionally, very regularly. 1
Okay.
o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the night, and this is when generally the threat activities become very strong, as they say, even in on these days and nights of Amavasya and in midnights, these negative activities can gain traction. So that's how it is. So this was one particular night wherein it was I'll not go into the particulars, but it was a missile firing sortie.
Right.
So we had one ship firing a missile, surface to air missile, and we had our ship engaging that missile. So that was my target to engage.
Okay.
And I was a sub-lieutenant then, just a newly born officer who was awe-inspired by everything that's happening around him. So I was given the camera and I was told to record this missile firing. So we had one ship that was firing out a missile, and so it was a missile to missile counter. Okay. So we had our ship again launching a missile to ditch that missile. So I was just standing on the bridge. Bridge is where the captain of the ship operates from. It is generally the place where the captain of the ship gets a holistic view of the entire scenario. So I was there in the bridge. I had this camera in mind. I didn't know what was going to engulf me next. Then all of a sudden from down below came this 20 to 30 feet long missile, and it started hunting. It was hunting. So it was on this missile launcher. It was moving left. It was moving right. It was tuning. Actually, it was being guided by a radar that was installed above it. Okay. So the radar was tracking the movement of that enemy threat generated missile. So it was launching, and suddenly when this missile was given a command or a clearance by the radar that yes, you have the target designation, now go and take him down. Then came the afterburner down below. So on a pitch dark black night, you had this afterburner. Even today in the middle of the night, when you wake me up and you tell me what do you remember from the Navy, I remember this. It was like a rocket launch right in front of my eyes.
And it will be definitely beautiful.
Yeah.
Different flame, those colors in the night time.
Correct. And we've seen Diwali where rockets go into the sky and explode, but trust me, I have seen a missile worth crores getting launched and hitting down another missile worth crores. So it was an amazing experience. And similar is the experience when we operate on board Vikramaditya. So my commanding officer always used to tell 4 things. See, there is no fun in sailing out Vikramaditya in broad daylight and you have not crossed. We have something called non-diversionary operations. So on a ship, when you land, you have a certain range. So when it comes for landing, it cannot come with all the fuel it has in its tank. Okay. It comes only with a minimum threshold, because with more fuel, more weight of the aircraft, more momentum, more difficult to arrest the landing or have a safe landing. Okay. And MiG has just about enough fuel to attempt 3 successful landings. Okay. So he comes for the landing. If he does not land, that is, if the hook does not engage, he goes for a second round. And if he misses the second round and if he is not within the airbase area, all he has is one attempt to protect a 300 crore aircraft.
Oh.
He misses it, he will not have enough fuel to come back and carry out a safe landing. So if you are within the base, then of course you can redirect to the base and you can land there. But when we do something called non-diversionary operations, you are far away from the base and you do not have enough fuel to go back to the base. So our commanding officer used to tell, as a Navy, as a carrier battle group, we have to be ever ready for a non-diversionary operation in a military environment, in hostile weather, during night time, in a enemy laden situation. So this is how our commanding officer always used to prepare our mindset. So whenever we used to prepare in such a manner that we are able to cater to all of this. And I would like to conclude, as an electronics and communication engineer, Navy is an ocean of opportunities. You all heard it. So Navy, in a sense, has made me and everyone in it a transducer. So what is a transducer? It converts one form of energy into another form of energy. So Navy has given us or tuned us to convert all forms of difficulties into oceans and oceans of opportunities. So that is how I see the Navy. Shanno Varuna, Jai Hind. Thank you.
Before we finish, one more question that I wanted to ask, because we have been speaking about Navy, all these technical aspects we spoke. But there even comes a personal life to the naval officers.
Okay.
So you have been married. How has Navy actually impacted your marriage? Just to say, like, what kind of a partner is required for a naval officer or a military officer?
Okay.
Do you think?
Okay.
Or
so I'm used to giving very simple my wife, Miss Megha, can answer it the best, but I'll give a simple corollary. So let's say you're very hungry and you have your first chapati and palak paneer. Tastes amazing. Second chapati, very good. Third, fourth, so that comes down, right? So in our life, Navy has created that right amount of optimum gap.
Okay.
So it has, yes, we were out sailing. As I mentioned, Navy is not built to be harbored. It is built to go out and explore into the oceans. So you might have also heard that generally when people are away for a stipulated amount of time and when they meet, their bond grows, their closeness increases. So I think that is the role Navy has played in my married life. In our initial days so I was married for by the way, I had got only 3 days of leave for my marriage, owing to official commitments. So I just came from my place of posting to Bangalore just for 3 days. And then me and my wife went back. I was with her for 5 days and then I was out for 45 days straight. So marriage for 3 days and 5 days with her. And then I was out for almost 2 months.
In the sea.
So that had its own advantage. I think it added a particular flavor and spice to our marriage. So I think that is the role Navy played in our married life in the initial days. But of course, I'll correct this opinion that people have about Navy. It's not merchant Navy. So merchant people have this ideology that once you're sailing, you're away for ages and ages into the sea. So Navy is a very balanced atmosphere. Navy is not a job. It's a way of life. So our seniors understand this. So our postings vary. So like in the army, you have a peace posting, you have a threat posting, you have a high altitude posting. Likewise, in the Navy, you have afloat appointments, you have ashore appointments. And our HR is very mindful of this, that they want to tap the best in us by balancing our personal and professional lives. So really I have not, the tagline of the Navy, as always it is the Navy gives you more. I have not been able to give to the Navy as much as the Navy has given. The Navy always gives you more.
It was really, inspiring, motivating to speak with you, especially you taking your time out and giving a peek into the way of life of Navies, how our Navy officers are living. It's really, it actually makes us very proud when we look at our armed forces, and, it does tell us that, how much ever we progress, there are people who are protecting us, who are sacrificing every day. You might tell it's a different flavor of life, but what I see is those are all sacrifices. Staying away from family for 50 days, 60 days, because humans are built to be around families, right? And when you have soldiers who are going out, who are, separating themselves from their family just to protect the country, it speaks of a patriotism on a different level. It was really nice speaking to you, sir. Thanks for this opportunity, and we wish you all the best.